Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Well, today I'm going to talk about a science fiction film from 1979, a Soviet film by Andrei Tarkovsky, and that would be Stalker, is the name of this film. Now, you can debate whether this film is science fiction, and you can make a case it's not, probably, or you could say it's just a very unconventional science fiction movie. And just to give a little bit of background, it is loosely based on a novel, which I have a copy of, called Roadside Picnic, by the Strugatsky brothers, who wrote the novel. And the novel is about after some alien intelligences have visited Earth, and they left, okay, but they left behind a lot of artifacts in certain regions of the Earth, and you have a culture around people who are not supposed to go into these zones, but they go there to try to get artifacts, and they can make a profit selling these artifacts. And the people that lead them into these zones are called stalkers, okay, who show people around, and they can find these alien artifacts. So, definitely a compelling premise. The movie veers a lot from the book, though, whereas Tarkovsky takes the story into a very existential, spiritual direction. I talked about his earlier sci-fi film, Solaris, which is set at a space station, and which is another film that's really about encountering something so complex the human mind just struggles to find answers for, to make sense of anything. And this is really what this movie's about, where in the movie starts out where we follow the main character, the stalker, who's married, who we've learned he's just been released from prison. He has a young daughter who is described as a mutant because of his exposure to the zone, as they call it, has affected his genetics somehow. But he's out of prison, and he is now taking jobs to lead people into the zone and explore, which is illegal. He has to sneak people in to do it, but that's what he's doing. So in the story, there is two other characters. There's a writer who wants to go into the zone, and then a scientist as well who wants to explore it. And doing some research on this film and some interpretations of the film, a lot of talk is about how the three main characters are kind of symbolic of. You have the stalker himself, who seems to be a religious man who might symbolize religion. The writer symbolizes the arts, and the scientist symbolizes science. So that's one way to read these three characters, who all have their reasons of going into the zone. And I should say that the setting of the movie, it's in this indeterminate part of Russia, but the landscape it's like a swamp. There's water everywhere. There's mud. The environment feels really bleak as these people go about their lives. And I should say as well, the film starts out, it's in this sepia tone of almost this yellowish, greenish sheen. But once the characters go into the zone, it's like we're in full-blown Technicolor. So almost like a Wizard of Oz switch off there, where we go into this world where everything turns colorful and things like that. So, and the secret of the zone is there's a rumor of this room people can go into. And if you go into this room, you'll learn what your innermost desire is, and it will be granted to you. Okay, that's the story that we're told anyway. And each of these characters has their motives for wanting to do that. The writer is upset about his career, about his reputation as a writer, and he's hoping to maybe find some answers in the zone. Meanwhile, the scientist's motives are somewhat less known at first. We learn a little bit more about the scientist as he goes into it and what he plans to do once they arrive at the room as well. And meanwhile, the Stalker, who is framed as, when we first meet him, like he's maybe this simple-minded type of guy who doesn't really have much of a strong opinion about anything. But the more we spend time with him, we can see that he's given a lot of thought to what the zone means and what it represents. And like I said, he's a little more spiritually inclined than the other two, and he is really seriously weighing these issues of spirituality and existentialism and everything like that. So to get a hint, it's a heavy movie. It's about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and a lot of other people have talked about boredom being kind of an aesthetic choice in this movie, where there are parts of this movie designed to make the audience feel bored, okay? Where the camera just kind of lingers on our characters as they ponder things. And I think, I probably need to watch this movie more times to get a little more in sync with it, but the idea is almost as if we're with the characters, and as the characters are thinking and trying to talk things out, we're with them, and we're just as befuddled and confused as the characters as to what's going on. And so we kind of go on that journey with them, journey of the mind, you might say, in this story. So as we learn more about them as they go deeper and deeper into the zone. It's also a place where time seems to work differently. Your state of mind seems to have some influence on the environment or even the weather of the zone. So there is like this strange telepathic thing happening as well. And it's also left ambiguous whether this is aliens that involved, or was it the result of some sort of some technological catastrophe that happened, whether it was something with the testing of nuclear weapons. There's the famous Tunguska event, probably mispronouncing that, when supposedly this large object from space crashed into the Russian countryside in the early 20th century, which is really interesting. You can Google that, the Tunguska event. But but it's just suggested that something cosmic or otherworldly is going on with this particular part of the world. And so it's a slow journey, and I won't talk about what happens when they reach the entry to this room and what happens. I think what happens when they do get there is it's surprising, it's mysterious. You may be hoping for answers, but you're not going to get them. Everything is ambiguous in this film. It's not going to spoon feed anything to you at all whatsoever. It's really what you bring to it, and it's almost as if the filmmaker Tarkovsky is pointing the finger at you and forcing you to confront whatever it is, like issues of the question of your innermost desires, like what could that be, and how you feel about science and art and religion and all these things. Like, it's really almost interactive in the way that this movie guides you into this very interesting quest that these characters are on. So it's and you could spend a lot of time talking about just the symbolism in this movie. There's so much use of symbolism. Nature is such a big theme in this movie as well. The connections, the relationship that humanity has with nature is such a big part of the movie. There's other people have commented upon Chernobyl, which would happen in 1986, years after this film was made. But just the whole vibe and look of this movie, it feels like you're in this wasteland, possibly a nuclear wasteland, that the film suggests anyway. So there is this eerie foreshadowing of what was going to happen in the future of this part of Russia. So there's things like that too, but there's just so many small details in the movie that I think you could you could fixate on, focus on, and things like that. There's just a lot there to think about, and yeah, so that's some thoughts on Stalker. And I know there's been some really good books written on this film that have get into the various interpretations of it. I know one book I'd like to read that I don't own is by Geoff Dyer, who was an English writer, wrote a book. I'm trying to find the title of that book, which I think he wrote. Yeah, Zona, a book about a film about a journey to a room. So I definitely would like to get that book, and I know he's watched and studied this movie many times, and would be curious to get a look at it. But yeah, a really unique film. There's really nothing like it. It is a singular vision, and you learn about the making of this film, where they had shot the entire film, and then they found out there was a problem with the film stock, and they had to go back and film the entire thing again, and actually change some of the things in the story as well, and change some of the characters. So just the amount of time and work that went into making this film, and you know, that is quite something to think about as well. You know, commentary just about the Soviet Union, I think, is in this film, about Soviet society. Comparisons have been made to the gulags in this. There's a lot of imagery in this film that suggests concentration camps and things like that. So yeah, the film is just so evocative of so many things about the past, the Soviet past, but also even more deeper things that get into, you know, the spiritual level, the scientific level, and trying to make sense of all these big questions. And this film does a really interesting job of presenting them as questions. So yeah. So those are Stalker, fascinating film. You know, if it might not be your speed, okay, so be warned before you go into it. The pacing, and it's not. It's a very unconventional movie in terms of its pacing, but I think if you are open to it, you'll be rewarded. So thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.